time to start cutting mortises and tenons for this face frame. Now this is a little overkill for doing face frames. You can use your Craig jig just fine. It'll get you through. It'll actually do a really good job. I like the mortise and tenon because I like to have open mortises on the back side so I can see the tenon sticking through. It's just a design preference that I happen to like. But as you guys know, I'm kind of a mortise and tenon kind of a guy, and we're always trying to get better at it. So most important part of doing the mortise and tenon is, of course, your layout. If you have a shitty layout, you're going to have a shitty end result. Now, pardon the French, but that's just about as plain spoken as it can get when it comes to this kind of thing. So, we have a beautiful marking knife given to us by our friend Douglas Mungham in England. And that thing has become my new best buddy, especially for doing things like this. Now I see a lot of people I see a lot of mortise gauges being used and marking gauges, things like that. That's very accurate. I don't have one, believe it or not, so I kind of do it my own way when I'm doing this kind of thing. I used to use a jackknife, but that's a lot nicer. So anyway, let's get you a close-up shot so you guys can see what I'm doing. So first thing I do is I don't worry about measuring quite so much just yet. When we get to the drawer bottom, that's where we're going to be doing our measuring. So remember how I said in the last video, you have faces, particular faces that you're using. You're going to face in, you're going to face out. Usually you take your best looking side, you point it out. Standard practice. So what I do is I start everything, I lay it out on the table so my face frame's exactly how I want it to set once I get it together. And to mark my first mortises out, and this is how I do it so there's no mistakes, no screwing around. I take and I get this lined up absolutely perfectly where I want it to go. And then I clamp it. You don't have to clamp it with such force that you mark the wood up. This is why you ruin wood that you're going to have to look at for the rest of your life. I get everything flush. I get everything right where I want it. Feel across here. Make sure that's nice and flush. If that's not nice and flush on you, it's not going to be as fun to do. So this one, because it's a wider mortise and tenon, I'm going to go a little bit further out with it. I'm going to come in a 1/2 inch on each side. So we got a little point mark there. I'm going to carry my lines. Now remember, you have your good faces touching each other. My advice to you, if you go all the way through with your knife kerf, when you're knifing your lines, you're going to see that when the frame goes together. So stop a little bit shy of the edges. The next thing that you are going to want to do is I'm going to take a knife line and score where these two meet. Now your clamps might be in the way, so do what you got to do to get them out of your way. Keep in mind you got to keep everything nice and tight there. Make sure this is flush. If it's not flush, your line's going to be off and you're going to have problems putting it together. You'll see what happens there. So again, we take the marking knife and I score across. So that's pretty much the same process for the whole shooting match. Okay, so before Dingleberry here goes and screws all this up, a very important thing to know when you're using one of these mortising presses, or if you have one of the setups for your drill press, which if I can find one, I'll throw a link down below. It is a cheap option if you don't have one of these machines, and they work very well. Big thing to keep in mind, do a test piece. Make sure your mortises are exactly where you need them. Make sure that thing's set up right. And a big thing, because there's no legend marks or anything on this, and nothing on this thing to tell you when that bit is square to the fence. So you have to do that yourself while you're in the setup process. So when you take your cut piece, do a couple of swipes through, and then if your lines are nice and lined up all the way across, you don't have any corners popping out on you, you know you got it nice and square. So before Dingling here decides to put you guys back in the time lapse and get some cheesy ass music that I don't know. I guess it's okay, but before you get some cheesy music, I just kind of wanted to squeeze that in there a little bit. Okay, so you guys remember all the sleds and everything we made to get ready for projects like this? Well, this is where your crosscut sled, especially a finely tuned crosscut sled, really comes in handy. So we have, it's handy to be able to have a nice fence that you can clamp things to for a stop block, so that you can make sure you get everything the same, uniform. That is so important in stuff like this. I don't always get perfect results, but when I do, it's because I took the time to make something right. So we're going to cut all the, we're going to start cutting all these tenons. We'll start off on this crosscut sled, and then we'll move to the tenoning jig that we made. So here we go. Now, before the weather gets totally crazy and you guys can't hear me anymore, it is time to start putting this together. So, what I want to do is the stiles along the side, I want to put those on last. So, you have to kind of plan ahead when you're doing this. Check all your tenons, check all your mortises, make sure they're kind of where you want them. Make sure you don't have any burrs along the shoulders. Make sure the cheeks are all lined up good. Then you can start throwing this stuff together. You don't need a ton of glue, especially if you cut them nice and tight, but you are relying on glue to hold all this together. And you know, a buddy of mine at work gave me a whole handful of acid brushes the other day. And of course, they're sitting in the work van. Good place for them, right? Now, I don't like a ton of glue on these because I don't want to deal with all the squeeze out. It's kind of a pain to clean it out of the corners I probably have more glue on here than I need already. This one's going in a little hard. There it is. I guess tomorrow we wait for it. Gotta let it dry overnight. Alright everybody, there is our face frame, mortise and tenon together. Gosh, it's been a long time since I built one like that, but I do like that style. That thing's never coming apart. I was gonna get cranked onto the box of the cabinet anyway, but like I said, for face frames, doors, drawers, stuff like that, I don't use the Kreg screws quite so much. I used to, but now that I'm learning a lot more about how to do this stuff, I kind of tend to like to try it out and use it. And keep in mind, every single one of them you do is going to get better. The first couple times you try it, you're probably not going to get picture book results that you want. Even guys who've been doing it 30 years don't always get picture book results, but this came out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. I do have some inconsistencies in the lumber as far as waviness, things like that. I know a lot of people say use your joiner, use your joiner. Thing is, I know how to use the joiner to take that stuff out of it, but the stock was already thin enough. If I had done that, I wouldn't have enough left to actually make what I wanted to make. So I'm relying a lot on the cabinet box to take a lot of that stuff out of it, to straighten it all out, which is going to be hard because that plywood being what it is, that shit's terrible. I mean, I've got absolutely terrible. That's going to be fun itself, just trying to get that all put together right. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you on the next one.